Hello everyone, in this video we're going to talk about closures in JavaScript. So to start off with, I'm going to create my JavaScript file. I'm going to call it closures.js, and you might be wondering what a closure is, or you might have some idea of what a closure is, but you don't really know how to implement it in JavaScript. So if you don't worry, we're going to go through it in this video. Now, a closure is basically a combination of a function and another function or method within inside that function that provides access to a variable within inside the function. So basically, it's a function within inside another function, and if that second function wasn't in the function, we wouldn't be able to access the function's attributes. Now, that's kind of a little bit confusing. It'll make much more sense when I jump into the example. We're going to start off by defining our first function that we're going to use. We're going to say function, and we're going to call our function user. And this function user is going to take in one parameter. And the parameter that it's going to take in is going to be called name. Now we move into the body of our function, and we want to define a variable called name. So we're going to say let, or we could use const, name is equal to name. So basically what this is saying is we're creating our new variable underscore name, and we're setting it to the parameter that we're taking in, which is called name. Imagine we want to create a new instance of this function. So we can say let example is the name of our function, and we're going to set it to new user. Now we need to pass in something to user because user takes one parameter. So I'm just going to pass in my name. So now you might be thinking, since we've set up our function, we've set the parameter. So you might be thinking, since we created our function and we've set an instance of that function called example here, we should be able to print out that name that we gave it, in this case, Ryan. So let's try this out. We're going to, first of all, put our instance, which is example. So we're going to say example dot underscore name, which is our variable. And we want to go and console log this or display it out to the screen somehow. So we're going to wrap this in a console.log. Now, if we go and run this, you might be expecting to see the name Ryan, but we're going to go and run it and see what output we get. And you can see we get undefined. Okay, so basically what's happening here is we're defining our name inside our user function, but then once we leave our user function, this let name or underscore name cannot actually be read outside of this function. So for example, if we had a console log in here with our variable name and we got rid of this console log altogether and we go and run this now, we'll see that we see Ryan, okay? But we don't want a console log inside our function. We want to do this outside our function, okay? So one thing we can do is we can create another function inside our user function that has the ability to call this underscore name variable, but can also be called outside of this function. So let's do that now. So if you're familiar with some object-oriented programming languages such as maybe Java or C#, you might be familiar with the idea of getters and setters. So this is basically how we would use a getter in JavaScript using a closure. So we do this by saying this dot whatever we want to call it. I'm going to say get name, and then we want to set this equal to a function. So we'll use the function keyword, and we're not going to take in any parameters. We don't need any parameters. We're going to use our curly brackets. And what exactly do we want to return when we call this function? So this function here called getName will be called outside of this function. So it'll be called out here somewhere. And what do we want to return when we call this? We want to return this underscore name. So I'm just going to say return underscore name. And now we can leave this the way it is because we've created a new instance and we've set it to Ryan. But similar to last time, we want to go and console log. And inside our console log, we want to put example.getName. Now, if you remember last time, we tried to fetch or get the underscore name directly, but we got an undefined for our output. So if we go and select get name, we should actually get the name of the user. So we're going to run this now and see what we get. And you can see I've actually made a small mistake here. we have to add 2 curly brackets at the end of this getName, because this getName is a function that we're calling. So if I go back up here and run it again, we can see that we get our output as Ryan. And this is how we can create a closure in JavaScript, and how we can access variables within inside a function while that value itself cannot be accessed directly. So we use an additional second function within inside the original function, and the sole purpose of that second function is just to be able to get the name or get whatever the field or variable is inside the main function. Thank you for listening, everyone. If you liked the video, give it a like. If you're interested in this type of content, hit the subscribe button and have a good day.